I think it's easy to forget and overlook the fact that the default state for all living organisms is growth. That when a single cell amoeba comes into existence or a baby elephant is born, they go through a period of growth, and this is true for everything. I'm not saying that growth is perpetual, everything eventually comes to an end, but this aspect of growth, let's take a look at how that works. And while everything is designed for growth, while everything is originally intended for growth, it doesn't mean it always will. You look at it in nature, infants don't always make it. Species don't get to grow in numbers, they eventually collapse. Why is that? And I think it comes down to kind of how the theory of evolution came about, which is the idea that if you're adapted for that environment, you will thrive and be able to reproduce, and your numbers will grow. So in a organizational context, if you have the right business strategy, then you'll be, for the environment, then you'll be able to reap the rewards and thrive and reproduce your offices. And on the contrary, that if you aren't suited for the environment, if you haven't adapted, then you'll be left behind. That the adaptations that the other members of the species have is going to give them an advantage that is ultimately going to lead to you not making it and growth stopping. So we see this a lot in nature and especially in business, where, for a classic example is Blockbuster, where they didn't see the changes in the environment. They didn't make the necessary adaptations to keep up with it. And so their growth stopped. They thought they were on top of the world. They had many, many blockbusters. So they thought their size was something that was going to prevent them from future failure. And they were wrong. Technology now, the environment changes too quick. And businesses, competitors can gain massive amounts of leverage in very short amount of time if they're better adapted for the current environment. So how do we figure out what strategy is best? How do we arrive at the answer, so to speak? And I think there's two methods of going about it. And the first one is to lock in and just laser focus on the rear view mirror, on what's worked in the past, and let that guide your strategy going forward. So what have other people done? What has worked in the past? And then just copying that and hoping that it works in the future. I think that is one strategy, and a lot of people do take that. We see that a lot in dentistry, where the strategy is to see what's working for other people, what has worked in the past. Why don't we keep doing that? And they don't think of looking at the road for themselves, assessing the situation and figuring out a way forward for themselves. So the other strategy is how do you do that? Which I think comes down to understanding principles and seeing trends, observing trends. So when you understand principles, based on the rearview mirror, based on the things that we've learned, then we can see how things are, how this mechanism of growth and marketing works, and then apply it to the trends that we see for the future so that we see how things are going to be like. And if we can prepare for the future and basically create a strategy that would align with a future version of the world, that would be best. So let's go back to nature for a second. Let's say you're a Darwinian finch and you have a beak that's made for breaking nuts, rather than a beak that is small for catching insects, flying insects, let's say. Of course, in nature, you can't change your strategy. You can't change how you're operating. You can't change your beak. But what if you knew as a finch that in the future, because of changing environments, that nuts were going to go away and there was going to be an influx of insects? It would be very beneficial if you could prepare for that, to start developing a beak made for insects in advance, so that when that time came, you would have a massive competitive advantage over the other birds who had beaks for nuts. And obviously you can't do that as an animal, but we can do that in business. We can see that, hey, the trends are going this way, and if we're the first to be prepared for that, or if we are prepared for that in general, then we can really do well and we can reap the rewards, we can multiply, we can thrive, etc. and etc. And because the environment is changing so fast and because it's changing faster and faster, this ability to understand principles and see trends and to catch the future before it arrives is one of the most competitive advantages that you can have when it comes to being a business owner. So let's take a look at the principles. And there are so many to talk about, but the main one that I want to have you understand is the idea of attraction, which is how does one entity become attracted to a different entity? Business, nature, romance, whatever it is. And I think it comes down to the awareness times alignment. So let's look at it this way. The number of people who are going to visit you as customers or patients is going to be determined by the number of them who are aware of you times the strength of alignment, which is how aligned are you to what they believe is good dentistry, is a good provider, etc., etc. Is this the type of dentist that I want? What should a dentist behave like? What should a dental office look like? The more alignment that you have there, the more likely it is that they're going to be attracted to you. And the more people you have, let's say your alignment isn't perfect, but let's say just a lot of people are aware of you, then you're still going to get some number of patients. And that's true in everything. So that is one fundamental principle. And I think we've over fixated and over focused on the awareness aspect of that, when I think we can do a lot of work to the alignment aspect of it. So if you want to check out how to learn, if you want to learn about how to create more alignment, I'll put a course in the description. It's completely free. I recommend you check it out. And that's kind of the main principle that I think we should take away and look at when it goes to moving forward. All right, alignment times awareness, or awareness times alignment. So now let's look at the trends. What is the changing trends? If we look back at marketing a couple years ago, what we see is that people were a captive audience. And this word, a captive audience, was so overused throughout the ages that it was the idea of, we have these group of people. They want entertainment, let's say, after a day of work. All they have are about 60 channels that they can choose from. We have this audience who is captive in those 60 channels, and we can advertise on them. And they have no choice but to listen to us. This is the idea of the captive audience. And we see how that has really been removed from the equation. How people aren't captive, how we can choose what content we get when we want, that we don't have to follow a TV schedule and wait for the right programming times, and we can just have stuff on demand, right? The user is empowered. Another trend is people have communication to a degree that's never been seen before. They can pull out their phones. Back then, email wasn't a thing. You had to send mail. It took a long time. It was costlier back then. Now, we can pull out our phones, talk to 100 people, talk to 1,000 people, and so on. If you want to talk about channels of distribution, the individual had none. If they wanted to talk to a large audience, what they had to do was go to a record label, if they were a musician, some manager, talk to them, get them to let them publish their stuff. But now what we can do is we can just start a YouTube channel. We can start a TikTok account. We can reach hundreds and thousands and millions of people just with the phone. So the level of communication of each individual has really been empowered. Word of mouth is on steroids right now. It's our ability for an individual to spread the message has been exponentially increased, and a lot of practices aren't taking advantage of this. They don't know how to take advantage of word of mouth, which is why the course I mentioned is completely about how to leverage this one trend. Another is the idea that we can leave advertising, that the old methods of how to attract people, of just blasting awareness, is no longer working. A trend we see is that now 52% of Americans have some sort of ad blocking. Back then, there was no way to block ads. You see it on the billboard, you can't block it. You see it on the TV show, you just had to endure it or change channels. You couldn't remove that advertisement entirely and then just go straight to your content. That's possible now. And more people are picking up on it. And so we're entering this era where people are empowered to fight back against advertising and people are winning. And so engaging continually in blasting awareness, paying for advertising, paying for visibility is becoming a strategy that is worsening. Right? So we see all these trends, and there's many more. There's many more trends, there's many more principles. I recommend you check out the course. It's going to talk about all of it. But when we understand this, what we can see is that the future is going to look very different, and how we engage in marketing, how we engage in attraction and getting people to come, just as simple as something like the dentist, that mechanism, that method is going to look very different, right? And it's not a good strategy to just follow the herd and to see what other people are doing and then to just follow along. Because what I've noticed from many years working with dentists is that dentists are some of the latest adopters, that they have a very high or very low risk tolerance, that they're not really willing to take risks. They're not really willing to take the first step. They want everything proven. And I understand why that's the case. There's a lot of risk at hand, but it's riskier to stay the same. Like, you must do some level of adaptation eventually. And so what I'm asking you to do, what I'm promoting, is the idea of stop adapting with the herd. That is going to keep you mediocre. That's going to keep you a commodity. That's going to keep you at the same level as everyone else. So you're going to be continually experiencing the difficulties that come with that level of behavior, which is feeling the pressure of competition because you haven't done the work of becoming remarkable and marketing in this new way that resonates with the new age. Because when you do that, you won't have to feel the pressures of competition, that people will be seeking you out, they'll be choosing you. And word of mouth, as we talked about, is on steroids, and you'll be able to leverage that for your own benefit. So the path I'm recommending is to stop following the herd and seeing what works before you take the leap, to stop looking at the rearview mirror as a guide for the way forward, and instead learn this stuff, learn what it is, learn the principles, understand marketing at a high level. It's completely free for you. And understand the trends. Just see what's happening. See how you engage with purchasing products today or visiting a provider. What elements of it stick out to you? And you can see how it's not like what it was done in the past. We leverage so many different things. We leverage video testimonials, like, and not in the traditional sense where you would have a patient sit down and you record them, but people just sharing their experiences on a reel for 30 seconds of different places. And it really shapes our understanding of how we're going to purchase something. Like, that never existed like just 5 years ago. This is something completely new. So understand the principles, observe the trends, and be a leader in how you're going to show up and how you're going to market your practice. Because when you do, that's the people who see all the benefits. I could talk on and on about all the organizations that did this process. How in 1998, Google started with Larry Page and Sergey Brin in a garage. And all they did was see a better future for how people search, how people find information. And they saw how this technology, this new environment was available. They saw the principles of how people enjoy or how people want access to information. And they saw the trends, and they were able to build something for that. So that when people were ready, Google just exploded. You can see the same thing with Netflix, how you see the trends of people going online. You can say the same with any remarkable business that has grown to a spectacular degree. It's all because they were able to align with the new environment better than anyone else. All right, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm actually gonna make this into a presentation for a keynote speech, and I was just brainstorming some ideas with you here today. I'll probably talk about it more and more in the next couple of weeks as I prepare for this speech. But yeah, that's it. Hope you found this video helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one.